Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'd like to start out just by thanking our panelists, our speakers who have come out today, and just doing a quick introduction for everybody. We'll start out with by Jaskaran Singh Sandhu. By Jaskaran Singh Sandhu has been a key proponent in the current state of WSO, the World Sikh Organization. He served in the past as the executive director of the World Sikh Organization and is also the co-founder of Boz News and writes heavily about different Panthic topics, speaks in the media about all these different topics, especially in modern times, all the things that are coming up within the community. He's been instrumental in ensuring that the media narrative is pushed towards our advantage. We also have with us a surprise panelist who, if you've seen the marketing material, was not included, but has so kindly agreed to join us for the panel today, and that's Dr. Tir Kaur. Dr. Tir Kaur has a history as an academic, a professor who researches geographies, organized abandonment, state violence on various local, regional, and international scales. Her current research project focuses on various geographies and forces of structural violence interconnected to Punjab, as well as within the diaspora. She teaches classes on state-sanctioned violence, theories of underdevelopment, surveillance, and emerging technologies of social control. Along with her published peer-reviewed research, she's a regular contributor to Panthic platforms and offers analysis centering on Sikh praxis and Gurmat. She has presented her work and methodologies at various international conferences, and mostly recently is presented on the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Germany. So thank you to Dr. Tir Kaur for coming. We also have Maninder Singh with us, who's flown in from BC. If anybody has kept up with the current state of events happening, especially after the assassination, the Shaheed by Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Maninder Singh has been instrumental in making sure that our voice and our narrative is heard on the world stage. Being a key proponent in the launching of the new Sikh Federation International, is currently the spokesperson for Sikh Federation Canada, and before that has had a number of roles, including being the founder of the Khalistan Center. If anybody knows about the work that Khalistan Center has done, Khalistan Center has a lot of amazing Panthic academic literature that covers the issues that we've been going through, and how we can move forward towards the path of Azaadi. So thank you to Maninder Singh for joining us on today's panel, and then also Prabjot Singh. Prabjot Singh has joined us from Alberta. He is one of the key writers of the Panth Punjab Project, which is another organization that focuses on Panthic academic literature, is also a member of the Sikh Federation Canada, and has completed numerous degrees in different topics with holding a master's, and focuses heavily on how we can research a lot of these deep Panthic topics, these deep topics within our community from an academic lens. So thank you to Prabjot Singh for coming. Then also Balpreet Singh. Balpreet Singh is a legal counsel for the World Sikh Organization. He has been instrumental, especially in the Greater Toronto area, for a lot of the issues that a lot of us deal with in terms of legal cases, Kurban cases, all these different cases that come on to WSO's desk. Balpreet Singh has been instrumental in making sure that those cases are won to our favor, and make sure that from a legal standpoint, our interests are protected. So let's please give a quick round of applause to all our panelists. Thank you all for coming. I think it's important that we talk about first the context of why we're here today. We kind of organized this event commemorating 40 years since the November 1984 Sikh genocide. Speaking a little bit about the context, I want to first hand this over to the panelists just to kind of give their perspective. When we talk about November 1984, we talk about the context that leads up to November 1984 and how that affects us today. We talk about a state of genocide that our people are in. We talk about the massacre of Sikhs in the streets of Delhi, organized by the Indian state, organized by the government in order to wipe out our people, in order to scare our people, in order to instigate fear-mongering among our people, so that nobody speaks of our Azaadi, nobody speaks of our freedoms again. So the first question, I'm going to keep it pretty open to the panelists, just to speak about, when we talk about November 1984, when we talk about the context that lead up to November 1984, how would you cover kind of those key events, those key moments in our history that led to that genocide, that led to our people being massacred that way?
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I got the cue to go first. I would look at it in a perspective of, like, if you take this as individual silo events that led to this genocide, no Nasal Kushi happens in like a silo. You can't say that post 1947 we ran a Punjabi Suba movement, and then we ran for Punjabi language within that. Then we went to the Anandpur Sahib resolution. Then we went to the Tarmi of the Morcha. There was a clash with Tera Singhs from Akhand Kirtani Jatha Pai Fauja Singh Di Agawai hit, unhone Shahidi Pai. These events led up to June 1984. You can talk about the emergency that Mrs. Gandhi ran in 1977. You can look at all these events in silos and consider that as in these were all lead-ups up to something bigger that was happening, but we are removing so much context from a historical perspective as to why this VAD or this enmity actually exists with the Sikh Panth within that state. If you go back to, we always say 500 saal da vaid, that is projecting itself on us today. So Guru Nanak Padshah's ideology clashing with the Brahman ideology is the root of the problem that Sikhs face within the Indian state that then manifests itself in a very violent form in many ways, over many times. So for me, like when I look at the underlying factors, we can pick moments in recent history, but where Guru Nanak Sahib has said, if the Brahman exists, caste exists. Where caste exists, you have class that exists, and other social injustices under that caste system. When those social injustices exist, you have the Brahman that has hegemony over power, wealth, politics. When that exists, the repression and oppression of minorities extends even further. Ultimately, there is a clash between the ideological values of the Sikh Panth and the Brahman that actually controls most of India. So when that clash comes forth in its most violent form, you see Nasal Kushi and genocidal politics at play. You see how an entire nation of people like Sikhs a mob was galvanized against them, not overnight. Leading up to June 84, there was plenty of examples of how Sikhs were vilified across the country, leading up to June 84 and then carrying over into November 84. And the planning of these events was done well in advance. So to remove the historical context of the struggle of Guru Nanak Padshah that led us to this moment in November 84, I think we can't do that. And I would just like to add just one little thing there, that as in November 84, we often look at it as in a moment in history where we use terms like Kalukara. That itije Kalukare da khissa sega 84. So in Kalukare, it was a very, very clear message as to how we came out of Kalukare. We don't want to get into this depression or this mayusi. We have many things that are running right now. We have political movements, we have referendum movements, we have many things in our community that we're actually engaging in. So after the Shota Kalukara in Panth Prakash, it says that when the Qaum got together, 10,000 Sikhs were killed in one day. And then when the Panth got together, in our historical text, it says that they got together and did Ardas, and in that Ardas, what they said was, Jo niksa jahe raj lahe mare ugur par jaye. That whoever got out of this now, they only have one order, one hukum, that they establish sovereignty so they can protect their future and their future generations. The Vadda Kalukara was the same. Tat Khalsa reh gyo gyo sakot gavai. That the Tat Khalsa still breathes, it's still alive. That as in within a decade, the Sikh missiles had established rule over Punjab. And the Tija Kalukara, which we look in June of 84, Sant Janal Singh Ji Khalsa Pindrawale, in that before the Kalukara happened, laid out for us that the day the Indian Army enters the Darbar Sahib complex, Khalistan's foundation will be laid. So that foundation is laid, so if somebody is working through an electoral system, if somebody is doing referendums, if somebody is using any means that the Guru Sahibs have given us to establish that Raj, that would be doing justice to the Nasal Kushi or the genocide in today's day and time. And anything short of that is working within a discrimination or a human rights dialogue, which is very limited. It works within the Indian state, it works within their legal system, it works within their judiciary, and asking for justice within that system for 40 years. It's in front of you actually what we've got, so the conversation really has to turn to sovereignty after that.
So I would agree with Bhai Maninder Singh largely that Guru Nanak Dev Ji's avatar in this world was a revolution. It was a declaration that the existing systems are not fair, they aren't good for the average person. And we have in Gurbani, Sri Guru Raj Abachal Atal Aad Purk Furmayo, that Nanak Raj Chalaya Sach Kot Sultani Neemda, that Guru Nanak Dev Ji's arrival was a new Raj. So how does that Raj play out in the real world? I think that's the history of the Sikh people. But successive Rajas have always seen Sikhi as a threat because we want to turn things upside down, because ours is a Halemi Raj. Ours isn't nationalist, that we want to rule a certain section of land because we're entitled to it because of our ethnicity, because of some sort of inherent characteristic. Our Raj is based on Halemi, which is Nimarta and Sarbatta Pala and Seva. And this threatens any existing hierarchy, any existing Raj. And we've seen whether that was the Mughal Raj, was the Pahadi Raje, what was the Afghans, the British, and now the Indians, that there are attempts always to do different things. One, to offer Sikhs the option of becoming a part of the system and basically giving up our claim to Raj. And if that's not acceptable, and it never has been, then to wipe them out. And then what we've seen more so under the Indians anyways, is a term actually that I think some of us have seen, Prabhjot Singh and I have seen it in the Foreign Interference Commission, cognitive warfare. So reinterpreting things, misinterpreting things, so that they will define for us what our terms are. So the Indians will define what Khalistan is. India will define what oppression is. India will define what extremism and terrorism is. So for me, 1984 represented an attempt that we will, if you won't become a part of the system, then we will try and wipe you out. And the message was that you will not be secure, that we will literally have to die. And what's happening today, in today's context, I think is a revival amongst our community. What we've seen early in the farmers' protest, what we've seen since then, that our young people who didn't live through that period, who aren't afraid of the state anymore, are willing to stand up again and say, this system is messed up. Based on our values, which are based on Sarbatta Pala, the well-being of all of us, that we won't stand for it. And what we're currently seeing is India once again trying to instill fear, trying to do everything it can to press down a community that has seen a new generation take up the torch, as it were. So that's what 1984 means for me.
I can proceed. Hello? Okay. So I want to pick up on that last point like what Singh just touched upon about kind of what comes next. We've been in a lot of talks like this one recently. I was just with Paving Singh in Surrey, and we were literally talking about it as well. As like, how many versions of this are we going to have? Not because it's not important to have these conversations. It's incredibly important to have these conversations. It's incredibly important to keep shining light on what's happening to us and what has happened to us. I'm going to make assumptions here and say with some confidence that everyone sitting in this room is an informed individual that has a pretty decent grasp on what's happening, has a decent grasp on what has happened, and continues to read up on these sorts of things, continues to be well informed on these sorts of things, continues to educate them on what's happening. Is that a fair assumption, or is anyone here gonna be like, no, you're an idiot, Jaskar, and you have no idea what you're talking about? You could say that. I have no qualms about that. Everyone on this table has at one point or another told me that. So if you believe that, you can tell me. But I think that everyone here is more or less decently informed. And what I really wanted to touch upon, again, to the last point Balpur Singh was saying there was, where is this struggle continuing to go? How is it in shaping how we act and behave? An event like this is incredible. And I really wanted to make that point. And I made that point to some individuals during the break. An event like this is absolutely incredible. Because when I was a university student, And I look shit for my age, but it wasn't that long ago, okay? When I was a university student, about 20 years ago or so, SSAs were not active. SSAs didn't hold a lot of events, and you definitely didn't have SSAs coming together in the way that they have here, right? Like you have, 7 or 8 SSAs together. There was an SSA event yesterday as well. We were just in California recently, where we had set up an SSA event in California. That's the revolution. I don't think people necessarily appreciate how huge that is. That never happened before. Not to the level that it's happening now, not to the level of sophistication that it's happening now. And I think we get so caught up, obviously I'm a media guy. We get so caught up on social media, right? We get so caught up on bots, fighting bots. I've wasted way too much time fighting bots. Part of it just kind of like twisted enjoyment. Part of it just because you feel like you have to respond to everything. And I've learned over time you don't respond to everything. But we get so caught up in like kind of these sorts of things that we lose sight of what we're doing incredibly well. And this is an example of that, where coming together in the real world, mobilizing together in the real world, talking about these things in person is how you win the revolution. Revolutions are often slow. They're not linear. They don't often make sense how they come about. And most of the university students, I'm assuming here, read up on the Russian Revolution, read up on the French Revolution, none of them happen like this. This is a sidebar. When the Russian Revolution starts, Lenin's not in Russia and he's losing his mind. He's like, I can't believe the revolution is finally starting and I'm not there. Right? Just as an example, these things aren't linear. So when we're talking about the Sikh struggle and kind of the injustices that we're facing and the mobilization that we're doing to fight it, rooms like this are incredibly powerful. And I kind of wanted to bring that back to like the present where we are now. Kind of institution building like SSAs coming together as a product of that institutional building like this event are profound. And how do we continue doing that? How do we continue building upon that? Personally, that's my hope as kind of the outcome of the conversation we're going to have here for the next 2 hours.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So I'm going to keep it really short and sweet because I think we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of the different angles that we need to approach this with. But I think for me, just echoing what Paranji just said about 1984 not being an event, it's not a historical moment, it's not a blip on a timeline. 1984 is a catch-all term, it's a symbol, it's a focal point of our existence. When we have these conversations, and I think we'll get into it in the next couple of hours as well, is when we talk about 84, we're in an academic setting at a university. You'll see a lot of us here engaging in an academic space, in a media space, or in a governmental space. None of those spaces are our space. That's about us interacting with a foreign entity, trying to make ourselves comprehensible so that our existence makes sense to them. So we talk about ideas of justice, we talk about ideas of genocide, we talk about counterinsurgency, we talk about foreign interference, we talk about transnational repression. I think for me, the fundamental thing, the most important thing for us to engage with Jarasi, with the Sangharsh, and what's happening right now with Bhai Hardeep Singh's Shahadat, is this idea that we exist on our own terms in our own way. 1984 is not about state violence against an ethnic minority. 1984 is about a clash of sovereignty and a clash of worldviews. Bhai Maninder Singh, Bhai Balpreet Singh talked about it in quite a bit of detail. We exist, we engage in Sangharsh, not as some kind of nationalism, not as some political movement. This is Dharm Yudh. This is about a jimmewari that Guru Nanak Padshah has gifted us. So when we talk about Charasi, when we talk about the Sangharsh, I think it's important to frame it in that way. So anti-Sikh violence that we've seen from the Guru period all the way up until today by Hardeep Singh Shahadat isn't about killing bodies. It's not about the death of Sikh bodies or violence to Sikh bodies. It's about a process to eliminate a Gursikhi altogether. How do you eliminate and target those bodies that manifest what Gursikhi means, that manifest what the Khalsa is, and force everybody else to pretty much conform to the structures that exist around us that are trying to daba us. So I'd say in framing this conversation and how we go forward in a Sikh space like this is to center Gurmat, Gursikhi and our Parampara and the Khalsa going forward.
I think kind of moving forward with that, because I think most of the panelists took a very kind of forward-thinking approach. So bridging the gap kind of over to that side of the conversation, I think Bajiskan Singh brought up a really good point about kind of the knowledge base that we have and kind of being well informed. I can say, especially from an SSA perspective, for all of us that are participating in the SSAs, that have been part of the SSAs, a lot of people kind of have that base understanding of what's happening, what's going on, but the context they don't really understand. The context of why things are the way they are and what they can do to move forward is something that a lot of us are really lacking in. And so kind of to put that into something constructive for us to learn about, the question I'll ask is, over the past few decades, it's been 40 years now since November '84, what do you think were some of the things that, and I'll ask this from our youth perspective towards the youth that are here, what do you think are some of the things that we as a Qawm have done well in terms of moving forward? And what do you think are some of the things that we maybe took some missteps on? That, and I don't mean like Akal Takht made a bad decision or this Samprada, this Jathebandi made a bad decision. From a grassroots youth, Nojawan perspective, what were some of the things over the past few decades that we can learn from in terms of how we move forward over the next few decades?
I mean, this thing you spoke last, so maybe you should speak first now. We just keep cycling this. What you know what I mean? Like, just it's a snake model. It's like the draft, you know. Just no, that's true. Okay, so what have we done well over the last 40 years? I'm in a very optimistic mood nowadays. I tend not to look at what we did bad. That's just been my mentality. Trying to live a less toxic life. And so I'm just going to focus on the good. I'm personally sick and tired of how we always criticize ourselves. Okay, again, I criticize our community all the time. I'm in the business of criticizing. I've criticized myself often, so I just want to make sure I flag that. But I think we get in a habit of just being hypercritical about anything we do as a community and about ourselves as a community. As a community, we punch way above our weight. And we do so because we do a lot of things right. The thinking that I have on this is it's one of those, it's easy to get it. We're in a university setting. It's easy to get an A, but it's hard to maintain it. And so the question to me always is, how do we maintain this ability to continuously punch above our weight across multiple verticals? Politics, economics, media, culturally. How do we ensure that we are succeeding on every single one of those fronts for the purpose of pushing whatever our advocacy is and our advocacy efforts are? And how do we ensure that we don't lose sight of what did go right for us? 40 years ago, I can talk from the perspective of the World Sikh Organization. 40 years ago when 1984 happened, again, I'll give the Canadian context. Folks in Canada, when you speak to them about what was going on at that time, were absolutely shocked at what happened, what transpired in Punjab, and wanted to speak out for their brothers and sisters back there. And so, there was this famous gathering at Madison Square Garden, and then as a result of the Madison Square Garden, there were some resolutions, and as a result of some of those resolutions, the WSO was eventually formed. I'm just giving you a WSO perspective. There's multiple others, and I'm positive that you're going to hear them as we go down the table. But that kind of mobilizing, coming together, speaking with one another, sharing thoughts, sharing perspectives, having those conversations with one another, being able to be critical with one another is very important when it comes to institution building. Institution building inside the diaspora is what is going to ensure that we continue to advocate effectively. I'll give you an Alberta example recently. There's a Gurdwara in Calgary, and there's some Gurdwara up in Edmonton. And they're both trying to support food insecurity issues in Alberta. One group in one city decided to raise money and give it to an existing food bank network. The other group in another city raised money and funds and opened up a Sikh food bank that serves the entire community. Now the outcome and the goal is kind of the same, but the outcomes are incredibly different from a community perspective and a community development perspective. And if you had the option of those two paths in front of you, which one would you choose? What do you think will generate the most net benefit and capacity in your own community? Build capacity, build leadership, build ability and platforms to do other things. It's building an institution, right? It's building a food bank, even though the outcome is roughly the same. And that really stood out to me as kind of like this dichotomy that exists, and our options are sometimes in front of us, is how do we build our own institutions? People ask me about Boz News. Yeah, how did Boz News start? What were you thinking at that time? And obviously it's a creature of the farmers' protest in large part, but it's also a creature of working in media over the last 10 odd years, where we have seen firsthand in our media advocacy efforts at the WSO kind of the pitfalls of trying to share our narrative. So you have two options in front of you. Option A is what we've traditionally done, which is try to reach out to mainstream journalists. I'm talking about the mainstream here. There's a very robust, Punjabi language media. There's a very robust kind of ethnic media landscapes in Canada. I'm talking about the mainstream. So, in one example is just you continue to do what we've historically done, whereas you're constantly trying to engage with mainstream journalists. You're constantly trying to pitch them. You're constantly trying to tell them. You're constantly educating them on what's going on in the community. How do we get our story out? You're drafting op-eds. Has anyone ever tried to pitch an op-ed to a mainstream outlet in this room? Is there anyone? Yes, one, two or three people. It's a painful experience. And majority of the time, you don't even get a response. Forget about yes or no, you don't even get a response. And that's a very, very frustrating experience for someone who works in media and tries to share what's going on in our community. So either A, we just continue to do that and hope for a different outcome, or B, we start telling our own story and understand how the media landscapes work and start telling it effectively. Personally, I went with option B after frustrating attempts with option A. And the ability to advocate on behalf of our community, again, is strengthened when we build our own institutions. But that comes also with actively participating on these issues and learning from mistakes, learning from the mistakes of others, but also being open to critical feedback. So the question was kind of moving forward, what have we done right? And I'm really kind of transfixed on the theme of the way forward. It's understanding that as Sikhs, we have to play in every vertical. And that includes politics, understanding the pitfalls of it, understanding its shortcomings, and adjusting as you need to cover the gaps on those pitfalls. Economically, what are we doing to build up our community economically, to build capital in our community? Culturally, right? What are we doing to share our messages in a way that connects with a lot of people, not just the people that really deeply care about the problems, because that's always a small group, right? How do you constantly try to engage with other folks? What are the cultural outputs that you can use to engage with folks? That also includes media-wise, right? This has been my thinking on this: is how do we ensure that we are continuously building institutions across all these verticals to continue advocating for ourselves in an effective way that also then transcends borders, because a lot of folks in the diaspora are sharing similar issues, whether that's America, whether it's the UK, Australia, whatever it may be, and start thinking globally about these things as well.
I'm going to build on that a little bit. So once again, going back to the origins of Sikhi, this wasn't just another religion. It wasn't even conceived of as a religion. This was literally a revolution, culturally, socially, spiritually. Everything was nirala, completely different, completely new, and better. And existing and carrying forward that revolution against these massive systems that have existed, and maintaining our meaning and maintaining our identity, that has been a real struggle. So let's just go over some examples of some of that struggle. So a gurdwara. A gurdwara is not a church, it's not a temple. So, when we use the term Sikh temple, very problematic, because we use it as a shortcut to explain what a gurdwara is, but for our next generation, when we do this translation, there's a lot that's lost in that translation in terms of meaning. So Gurdwara was like a hub. It was where we go, yes, to do sangat, where we go to learn, where we go to mobilize, where we go to plan. This was our center of our community. But we've lost some of that. And purposely slow. It's not because it just happened. It was purposely designed for us to lose that. So the British came, looked at the gurdwaras, and said, who owns the gurdwara? And said, well, the Mahant is the one administrating, so the Mahant is now the owner. And that led to a complete degeneration of the gurdwara. We're all familiar with the gurdwara reform movement. How the Mahants basically took the income from the land that was given for a different purpose and made it into private property. And this was because the British needed to understand it in terms of private property. This was their system. So then the Sangat, the Panth, gets together and does this morcha to take the Gurdwara back. And now that we're not in an authentically Sikh system, okay, how are you going to govern it then? And then we brought in this voting system. And now we have Gurdwara across the world that are governed by a voting system, which initially we thought we could manage. We made the compromise because, the people that are going to be elected, they're from the Panth, they're Amritari, we'll make it as best as we can. But because that was an authentically Sikh system, we've now reached a point where Gurdwara have changed. And that's largely because of this voting system. So the Halemi that we were talking about, where the Sevadar is the one at the bottom who's trying to uplift all the people, the Mukh Sevadar model is now the Pradhan model, where the Pradhan now sits at the top as opposed to at the bottom, and everyone now serves under the Pradhan, and it's the same model that we see in the rest of the world. And now we see the Gurdwara moving away from its initial purpose of being a place to do Sangat. Like as a community, if we want to do Sangat, what does that mean? And so many of us, I get sad that we don't even remember as a community sometimes what Sangat means. Sangat was an interaction. It was listening to Katha, listening to Kirtan, but it was also interacting with other members of the Sangat, having dialogue, learning Santya, learning Gurbani, and trying to find those spaces in current Gurdwara, very, very difficult. Very difficult. So it wasn't, this was, once again, this was an institution created by the Guru that the existing systems have tried to take away from us, tried to minimize it. So that's one. But even moving ahead, we weren't static. So the Sarbat Khalsa was a system that the Sikhs created after the Guru period, right? To govern ourselves. So the Sarbat Khalsa was assembled. Everyone is equal. Everyone gets together in unity. They come up with a gurmata, which is unanimous, consensus-based, and then a hukumnama is issued and everyone follows the hukumnama. This was our system. But that system also, over time, we've lost. So that was an institution that we created and now we've lost and we have nothing to replace it with. So now we're trying to find ways to govern ourselves that are authentically Sikh models. And this is I think, going to be a pretty important struggle. And the result of not having these institutions is in front of us. So when I started this job 15 years ago, like when we were planning, I used to say that our gurdware are going to be facing a crisis in maybe 15 to 20 years. Because I used to say that our generation that's born and raised here, we don't connect with the gurdwara the same way. Like we go there for maybe an Akhand Path or an Anand Karaj, but going every week, that was declining. That's actually changed because of the international students that have come here. And they've, because it's in our DNA, we go to the gurdwara, we attach to the gurdwara when we're in a new in an area. But this won't last. The cycle will start again. And basically we're at 3 generations. So the first generation that comes to Canada, we speak Punjabi, understand Punjabi, read Punjabi, connected. Second generation often doesn't read Punjabi, but tutti futti bol lenne hai and we understand it. Third generation can usually understand Punjabi, to some extent, can't speak. And the fourth generation, it's completely blank. It's 100 years. Do we have institutions in place to keep us connected with who we are? Or are we destined to just dissolve into this existing society that we're in right now? And that's what I'm afraid of. So the struggle that I think that we have right now is to build our institutions, like Jaskan said, to build our institutions and where they don't exist, to recreate them. And then just like the Sarbat Khalsa was an idea that the Panth came together and created, and it became a sacred idea after the Guru period, we may have to come together and do something like that again.
So I'm going to shift tack just a little bit, but I think when we talk about assessing our history or what we've done over the past 40 years and where we kind of go from now, I think it's crucial that we think about what our frame of reference is when we look back at the last 40 years. How do we understand what our touch points are, or what our kendri nokte are, or what this Sangharsh was about? How it was fought, why is that relevant to today, and how do we kind of go forward? And I think for me, fundamentally, the most important thing, like I touched on earlier, when we talk now about 84, when we talk about the Sangharsh, we're talking about terms like genocide, we're talking about justice, we're talking about foreign interference, we're constantly interfacing with the external entities around us that are oppressive powers, that are also trying to subordinate our sovereignty. So those conversations need to happen in some shape and form for some people, for some part of our Sangat. But internally, fundamentally, what is our core worldview when we're looking at our past, the legacy of the Sangharsh, and what's happening right now, needs to happen from the terms of reference of sovereignty. So one of the biggest things that kind of bugs me, and when we kind of look at what's happened in the last 40 years, we haven't gotten anything, or even around this idea of justice, which I think consistently comes up, that it's been 40 years and we've never gotten justice. And I think we ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਦੇ ਮੂੰਹ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕਦੇ ਨਿਕਲਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਨਸਾਫ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਲੈਣਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹ ਭਾਈ ਸਤਵੰਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਬੇਅੰਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਲਿਆ, ਭਾਈ ਹਰਜਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਜਿੰਦਾ, ਭਾਈ ਸੁਖਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਸੁੱਖਾ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਾਥੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਲਿਆ. That the justice that the Khalsa seeks, we got. The Khalsa has never been in a position, it's never been our tradition, it's not how we exist, to go to somebody else and ask them, Sanu insaf davo. Khalsa dujyan nu insaf vandada ya. So there's a fundamental shift that we need to go through in how we even view ourselves and who and what we are. We're not an ethnic minority. We're not just citizens of another country. So this idea and reflecting on what the Khalsa is. So when you look at this idea of sovereignty, it's inherently tied to this idea of authorship, this idea of authority, this idea of authorization. So when you talk about justice, You're talking about the state is the ultimate power. They have the right to inflict violence, use force, enact justice. And that's why we have to ask the state to exercise its authority or authorize somebody else to do something. The way that the Khalsa exists is Khalso huwa khud khuda, jim khubi khub khudai, आन न माने किसे की एक बिन सच्चे पातशाह. So this idea that the Khalsa exists on this earth as Khuda itself. Now we are Khud Khuda. The Khalsa exists as a sovereign and we don't need anybody else's, we don't seek anybody else's, definitely not a justification. We don't seek anybody else's authority. And that's not just a reactive concept, that we're going to enact justice when somebody does something wrong to us, but it's also inherent in the idea of sovereignty and Raj itself. We don't seek an external entity to give us Raj, whether that's through a local government, whether that's through the UN, that some other power is going to come and give us something. Raj di jehdi bakshish hegi wo Satguru ਵੱਲੋਂ ਹੋਣੀ ਹੈ. So I think understanding, shifting our frame of reference again, and centering the Guru and the Panth the way it's meant to exist in this world. And I think that's really hard because we get caught up in these external spaces all the time, and that's why it's important for us to come back to these spaces and go through that paradigm shift again and kind of recheck ourselves and recalibrate. So when we talk about sovereignty, when we talk about Raj, it's something that's going to be created through our own power, through our own institutions that Jaskaran and Balpreet Singh were talking about. Our Torah, our path forward is not just by lobbying other governments that they're going to solve our problems for us. We have to develop and build our institutions, not just as social services, but as political powerhouses and the center points of our sovereignty. And that's how we go forward and that's how we move ahead from here. And so that's not just a historical point in the 18वीं Sadi or just in 84. When you look at June 84 itself, there's a clash of two sovereignties. Sant Jarnail Singh Ji wasn't asking the Indian state to give us justice. Or that, hey, please don't invade Darbar Sahib. Khud khuda ho ke madane jang de vich jooj ke shahadaਤਾਂ ਪਈਆਂ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਉਹ ਫਤਿਹ ਆ. That is the guidance and our path going forward into the future and how we engage. When you look at the example of Bhai Hardeep Singh, Bhai Hardeep Singh is not celebrated because he was an MP or an MLA or he led advocacy initiatives with the government. He was looked at upon as leadership because he built the Sangat, he built our community in our own spaces on our own terms. Didn't ask anybody else for permission or for authority. And when you look at where we're at right now, geopolitically, domestically, in any sense, the most important thing for us to understand is to recalibrate and connect with our Sadant and the Darsh that Guru Sahib has given us, but also recognizing, feeling, and celebrating our power. The entire world is looking at us right now and talking about us right now. It's not as victims. It's not because we're pawns in somebody else's game, unless we pretty much roll over and kind of let ourselves be used as pawns. We are a stakeholder in the future that is being shaped right now, that's being contested, that's being argued and fought over. The Guru Khalsa Panth is a massive global stakeholder, and I think it's important for us to get into that mindset, that it's not just woe is me and victimhood from the past, but recognizing our power from our history and from the legacy and from the Sangharsh itself, and where we sit now today, going forward.
So I'm probably the most senior person on this panel, so I'm going to rattle off a bunch of things I've seen around me the last 25 years or so of organizing. One of the major, I'm going to start off with actually the kind of like the things that we need improvement on, or things that we have done maybe that we could improve on in the future, because we didn't do that in the past. One of them is this idea that we didn't let people know. So this conversation has been around me for at least 20 years, that as in like we didn't do a good enough job in 1984, we didn't tell politicians, we didn't tell like the media, we didn't do this, we didn't do that, we didn't have people that wrote reports, we did everything. The bujurgs that are in this room, the elders that are in this room or beyond, everything was done. the idea that the state will accept what you're saying just because you're saying it is one of the things, I think, the problems that both Tirkor and Prabhjot Singh have touched on. The question was not of them understanding. The question was one of political will, diplomatic ties, economic interest. They knew everything. In November of 1984, November 28, 1984, there's a Globe and Mail article, I think it's in a report that Prabhjot Singh had kind of put out on behalf of the BC Gurdwaras Council and the Ontario Gurdwaras Committee around misinformation, disinformation earlier in 2023. In that, the Globe and Mail article from November of 1984 is, just paraphrasing, is saying that India uses multiple modes of warfare against Sikhs, that they use misinformation and disinformation to turn political and media people against Sikhs. They create interference within their own community. They do all of this. They do all of this because there's the backbone of the Punjab independence movement is being run from Canada. So in November of 1984, Canada is aware of foreign interference. Canada is aware of a version of transnational repression. This isn't a year ago after Hardeep Singh Shahidi. So this idea that states don't know, I think we never should be that naive. States know. They know what they're doing. Their interests are first. America has a slogan, American interests first. They should be very clear as to where their interests are going to lay. They're going to lay within what they can actually gain economically, diplomatically, and from like a global positioning perspective. So that's one thing that I think that we have to understand is that it's not a thing that we weren't enough, that we didn't do enough, we didn't raise our voice enough. We did everything. We did everything we were supposed to do, and we're in a different position today, a year out from Paji Hardeep Singh Shahidi, than we were 40 years ago, or the mahal and the environment they created. So that's one thing I wanted to kind of touch on. The second thing that I think we can improve on, then I have a list of good stuff. The second thing is giving each other space and tolerance. What I've seen in the last 10, 15 years is more and more voices emerging in this space, which is great. One of the things I'm also seeing with that is that there's very little tolerance for deviating from a particular line that someone might think is that this is the way. I think that's very distressing for a lot of individuals, especially young people. Because you're finding yourselves, you're finding your voices, whether you write, you speak, you go into political spaces. We're in political spaces right now, not for the sake that we want to become MPs or MLAs, but we have zero accountability when it comes to what India does in Ottawa if World Sikh Organization, newer organizations, someone isn't out there to challenge them. So you have to occupy that space. You have to challenge them on the ground that they're fighting. They're in every political party in Canada. They're within Ottawa. They're within like bureaucracy. They're within like the people that are whispering in like elected officials' ears. Then where are we? So we have to challenge them in these spaces as well. Even if we know that these spaces are not ours, these spaces will never provide us essentially exactly what we're looking for. But there is a space that the Sikh narrative and the Khalistan narrative can come out in its Narol way. And it's a space where the Indian narrative, which seeks to malign and criminalize Sikhs, can be challenged as well. So when I look at what are the things that we've done very well, the Jujaru led in and of itself from 1984 to approximately 1995 is a massive victory for our people. You can never look at these types of movements as in like, oh, we lost. ਹਾਰ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਦੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੰਨ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਹਾਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੰਨੀ like as in we move and shift from our Guru period till now. If we look at loss of life as a loss, then Guru Arjan Pacha, Guru Tegh Bahadur Pacha, the Sahibzade, everything's a loss, and everything is charti kala to us. So that idea, that thinking, we have to kind of get out of that as well, that this movement is still reshaping itself in many different ways. So that was a huge victory. If you come into the early 2000s, I want to let you guys know, like the way we use Khalistan right now, Balpreet Singh might remember, everyone else might be too young, except for Jaskaran. I can't really tell how old he is. But I remember coming to Toronto in early 2000 and dealing with some Naujwans here. I was a Naujwan myself back then. And people were saying K-word around me. I had no idea what K-word was. Like, I was extremely confused, and then finally I just asked, and they're like, oh, and they whispered Khalistan. I was dumbfounded, because in Surrey, we at least talked about it. And we talked about it in some circles, but literally it was K-word, K-word, K-word. And if you look 20 years after that, where we're at now,
you would never see this, like just Karan said, like you'd never see this 20 years ago. You wouldn't see the imagery, you wouldn't see the Khalistan paraphernalia, you wouldn't see the shirts being sold outside, you wouldn't see people buying them and wearing them. In 20 years, we have normalized the word Khalistan, and there's a couple of reasons why, and we have to kind of just touch on those as well. Two major things happened that we have to recognize. One is the term genocide when it came forward. When genocide came forward, there was a bunch of people talking about it, and credit where credit is due. Sikhs for Justice took this term and ran with it. They took the term, they normalized it, they ran campaigns around it, they did large gatherings around it, and Jathebandi came forward and actually did the work around it to normalize it within the Sikh psyche, which is the most important thing, like the other speakers are talking about. Once it's in our psyche, it's not going anywhere. When riots and dange and like maybe pogroms at the most was the language we were using, it completely redefined who we were and what we were struggling for. So that was a huge thing. The second major thing that the same organization, I would give them the most credit for, is that we have heard this thing from India repeatedly that there's a fringe movement for Khalistan in the West. There's a handful of people that are troublemakers. And when the referendum started happening in the West, the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands that started coming out, it was shocking, I think, for many people. As in, like, this many people actually are connected to this idea. And those were two major myths that were dispelled for our community, first internally, because when you see your own community, many within our community were shocked, let alone the Indian state, let alone the Canadian government, let alone media. But people within the Sikh community themselves were surprised that this many people are actually for the idea of Khalistan. No longer can they use that there's a fringe, there's a handful, there's a few troublemakers that are speaking about this issue. That myth was dispelled as well. In 2018, we had like Khalistani extremism for the first time added to a report that Canada releases every year around terrorism threats to the country and threats to the country. And the Gurdwara committees, WSO, others came forward and we challenged that, not for the sake that, hey, Santji used to say if the Indian definition of a terrorist back then was, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਛਕਾਉਂਦਾ ਆ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਥੱਲੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਕਰਦਾ ਆ ਸੰਗਤ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੇਰਦਾ ਆ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਅੱਤਵਾਦੀ ਆ ਫਿਰ ਮੈਂ ਅੱਤਵਾਦੀ ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੋਚ ਲਓ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ. So if that was a clear defining moment for Sikhs, as the state will try to define you, the Canadian system, we're not talking India, in 2018, December, it was Canada that labeled us as an extremist terrorist threat to Canada. And that was Sikh Khalistani extremism, not just Khalistani, Sikh Khalistani extremism. It brought all of us into that envelope. And we challenged that as a people because we didn't like that definition. We will define who we are, and we had that removed. But the idea beyond that, as in like the SSAs, the Naujawan organizations that have come forward, all of them that have come forward have gotten into spaces like this. So collectively, we have normalized the term Khalistan. So all these things that have happened since 1984, there's a lot. But just in a nutshell, like as in for me, like that's what I've seen in the last 20, 25 years, that we have made massive steps forward, we have taken. And this isn't the time to go back. To limit the conversations to just human rights and discrimination will always be against that. As in, I would never want to see us to limit the conversation to a place where we have to rely on others to deliver things for us, and we have no responsibility that we feel is on our shoulders. That there is sacrifice in these movements often, and that sacrifice is tan, man, and tan. It can be any one of them, it could be all of them, we don't know. All we know is Guru Sahib ne kya hai sangharsh karna. Our job is to continue down that path. So I just wanted to point those things out. There's a bunch of things that are, we feel like we fall short, but we need to cut ourselves some slack as well. That we've done a lot of things right over the last 20 and 25 years. That's why we were in this room having this conversation today, is because of all those organizations, of all those individuals, for all of you now that are actually connecting to this idea. So there's a lot to be grateful for to Guru Sahib, that as in like we're actually probably at the strongest point of the Khalistan movement post 1995 in the day that we sit today.
Can I just add something quickly?
Yeah, good.
Like, we collectively did such a good job in challenging that 2018, no, 2000, was it 2018, that report? Holy shit. Okay, so 2018 report. We did such a good job challenging it. They've literally never brought it back. There's been no updated terror report from the Canadian government since 2018. That's true, right, Bill Precinct? Like, fact check me. Yes, I knew I'm right. So that was because we did such a good job. And like I think one of the reasons why it was so powerful is because if I was to think about a turning point, at least as like in the Sikh kind of activist spaces here in Canada, and the Sikh institutional spaces in Canada, 2018 was probably the first time in a very long time where all the different organizations and all the different leadership came together and like were united, like in a very sincere way, from the Gurdwara to the organizations, from leadership on the ground, from grassroots, from SSAs. It was a very special moment because before 2018, there was still a lot of like random fractures, and everyone kind of played nice, but sometimes they didn't play nice. But post 2019, I think everything's changed in a lot of ways. And just to another point that Parminder Singh brought up was this whole idea almost of like self-censorship. We use the words K-word. And I think a lot of our problems come from like the self-censorship, where we stop ourselves from talking about things. And Bill Singh kind of touched upon this as well, where we kind of lose our frame of reference, and that kind of doing away with that self-censorship, which has happened over the years, partly because of the young folks sitting here. My age is I'm 38 years old. Look 60, but I'm 38. Just to answer Nindi's question, the reality is because of youth like you guys being so unapologetic about speaking on these topics, being so unapologetic about organizing on these topics. Like, you've done a great job in eliminating kind of that self-censorship that existed amongst a lot of folks in quote-unquote Sikh leadership spaces. And not to say that it doesn't exist, it kind of does here and there, but it's mostly been done away with. And what that has changed is, from a narrative perspective, is when we're afraid to speak about something, all we're doing is allowing those in opposition to it to define and shape the battlefield. So when we refuse to talk about controversial topics, when we refuse to talk about topics that have some associations with it, one way or another, that we believe it may have, we are not doing ourselves any service as a community. And it kind of goes to a concept known as like political speech. There's a really good book on political speech. The name is escaping me, but I will mention it afterwards. I'm sure it'll come to me. What they found was when folks don't touch upon a topic because they think it's controversial, all they've done is ceded half of the battlefield and allow themselves to be flanked on the issue. That's all they've allowed themselves. That's the position they put themselves in. So it's on us to speak about these kind of controversial issues. It's on us, and I'm using that in a quote, like don't take me literally here on some of the things I'm saying, but if we're not speaking about these topics, we're just allowing the opposition to frame it completely and remove ourselves from the equation, and those conversations are happening without us. When we insert ourselves and allow ourselves to define terms that are our terms, that belong to us, that are a piece of us, it completely shifts the narrative battlefield. And that is something that has changed considerably, especially, I would say, since kind of the quote-unquote Trudeau trip to India, the 2008 experience onwards.
I think touching on some of the original points that were made, because kind of we titled this portion of the event as The Way Forward, and paving the path to Azaadi, thinking about from an SSA perspective, or even like outside of the institutions, but from a student perspective as individuals, in terms of the next immediate steps. Because I think in a lot of these sorts of events, a lot of these conferences, these panels, and I know you guys have spoken on a lot of panels at a lot of conferences, we speak a lot about the macro, and we speak a lot about kind of as a community where we need to move, the problems that are coming at us. But we don't really talk enough about the immediate solutions that can make a long-term impact. And when we do, we talk about it, again, from this institutional, or even when it is individual, from a perspective of somebody that is active, somebody that is kind of well off, is educated, is doing whatever they're doing in their particular field. From a student perspective, for these SSAs, what do you think is our immediate next step? And I'll put it in two kind of portions. One from a Siddhantic perspective, and then secondly from a political perspective, because I know Pai Singh and Dr. Tirkor, you guys spoke about kind of the Siddhantic perspective as well. From those two perspectives, if you guys had to give kind of the immediate next steps that we as students can take, and then what kind of long-term impact do you think that will make, and what direction that should go in?
You know, I'll start again because I love the sound of my own voice. Okay, I will answer the political one because I'm clearly still on the spiritual path. I'm not there quite yet. So I'll touch upon the political. Decisions are made by those who show up. And as students, as members of SSAs, I think you guys don't tend to realize that. Put yourself in the position of showing up as often and as much as possible, regardless of how frustrating it is sometimes to be in a room where no one listens to you. There was a point in time where Balpur Singh never listened to me. Now he has to pretend to listen to me, which is a huge achievement. That's all it takes. As just like an immediate, real-world, practical next step is show up. As silly as that sounds, that is the honest truth. You know, when I came out of law school, so this was 2012. You know, I came out of law school, I finished my articles, I told myself, okay, I'm in a position now where I can be useful to my community. And one of the first things I did was I shot an email to the WSO, and I shot an email to an organization that was active at the time, the Sikh Activist Network. Not sure if anyone's familiar with that. It might be a little too far back for some folks in this room. I shot 2 emails. Exact same emails. I didn't care if they never responded or they ignored me. I just shot them. And I said, I just came out of law school. I have a law degree. I would love to do pro bono work. I want to be useful. Please let me know if I can be useful. San never replied back, but WSO did. Balpur Singh replied back. What is it now, 2024? 12 years later, I can't fly to India. So, you know. Long story short, I got really active. The reality is that I just showed up. There's nothing inherently great about me or special about me other than the fact that I'm relentless and shameless. That is literally it. And so, you know, with Balpur Singh started getting active, you know, we did there was a couple of accommodation cases that we worked on at the time, helping. There was a little kid who had an issue at an elementary school that we helped out with. One thing led to the next, and then we continue to show up. That's it. There's nothing else, you know. And I think for students, because I remember being a student, I really remember being a student and feeling like, who the hell am I? Who cares? Like, who cares about Jaskar and Sandhu? And I don't come necessarily from a background where, you know, folks were super active and I just, you know, kind of was like a nepo baby of some sort. It's just showing up. That's it. Politically, just show up. You know, there's some folks here that are active in politics here. You know, I see some familiar faces. You show up to 3-4 political events in a row, you're a regular. Like, you're part of the team. You're core team now. Like, that's how simple it is. And I'm kind of simplifying it. I'm generalizing here a little bit. But I want you guys to get in the mindset of just showing up. Show up to your Gurdwara spaces. There's some folks here that sit on Gurdwara committee. Show up to their meetings whenever you can, if they allow you to enter. But if they do, and often they do, they're good people. Yeah, like, no, just go and stop. No, but like, often they hold events. Like Malton Gurdwara held that Panthik meeting just recently, right? Show up to these things. Show up to them. We were just in Surrey for a Panthik meeting at the Guru Nanak Gurdwara. The folks that show up, you start meeting them. You meet them a couple of times. All of a sudden, you get very comfortable with them. All of a sudden, now you're privy to conversations and you're part of the team. That's all it takes. And so, I want to just really encourage that for the students in here is put yourself in situations where you're meeting as many people, where you're building networks, where you're engaging with folks. You will find very quickly that you will go from someone sitting at the back there trying to hide to be someone sitting here giving wisdom for some reason. It happens a lot faster than you think.
So I want to touch on two different things, but mainly just building off of what Karan just said about showing up. Because I think a lot of times when we come to spaces like this, we're excited, we're emotional, we kind of feel the feel the kitch and the desire that we want to do something. And then sometimes when we start to get confused or overwhelmed or we're afraid and we can't figure out what to do next. And I think for me, the biggest thing is, like Karan said, is showing up. Is this idea that we can't wait, nor have we ever waited for this idea that we're going to get this critical mass, and then we'll do something. We're going to wait for somebody else to get active, everybody else to get active, and then we're going to contribute to something. There's a pankti in a slok written by Guru Angad Padshah, Torde ko torda mile, udte ko udta, जीवता को जीवता मिले मुए को मुआ. Is this idea of torde ko torda mile. If you're not walking on this path, you're not going to meet those others who are also trying to figure this out and get to that same destination. Getting involved, moving, participating in Sangat, and getting started is the fundamental thing. Like I've had in the 12 hours since I've been in Toronto, I've talked to multiple Naujawan because there's a kitch, there's a desire, there's an intensity that we want to do something. And there is no roadmap for each person that we need everybody to do this or we need everybody to do that. The first and foremost thing is getting started. So I think for myself, like as an example, like I grew up in Edmonton. And all of the stereotypes about Edmonton are absolutely true. There's no reason to be there. And growing up, when I was there, like there was no Sangat. I think when I was in high school, I was one of maybe 4 Amritari Naujawan at that time. I had no Sangat, definitely no Jathebandi, and no idea of what I'm going to do next. During the Nagar Kirtan, I printed 100 Khalistan t-shirts, and I figured it out, started selling it to my friends, and just getting everybody, we got to wear these. Around that time, Balpreet Singh used to translate Jeevaniya of Jujaru Singhs. And I think for a lot of people in my generation, that was one of our first direct interactions or insights into how the Sangharsh was fought. I grabbed a bunch of those, I threw them in a booklet, I printed them at the library, and I started handing those out. Neither of those things had a significant impact, but it got me kind of on this path and moving and figuring it out. And eventually you come into touch with this person and then that person. And eventually I came into touch with by Maninder Singh and others and have been doing seva in this space ever since then. So I think for everybody who's curious, confused, or excited and trying to figure out the next step, I would say is a move in some direction and participate, get involved in some kind of seva. And why I say that there's no cookie cutter approach and there's no right answer for everybody is because I think when you want to get involved and what your contribution is going to be, I think there's a couple of things you need to consider. And one is, जिन्ने भी आप इत्थे बैठे हैं, गुरु साहब ने सानू सारिਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਰੂਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਮਹਾਰਤ ਬਖਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ. You have a certain skill set, you have a passion, there's something that you're good at. And in your local Sangat or on a bigger level, there's somewhere where you can identify a gap. So nobody else can give you the answer of this is what you should do. You have to try and experiment and fail over and over again to figure that out and develop the skill set, the network, the resources, the institutions to participate in that seva. I'm now 20 years from that point where I was printing off those t-shirts and those booklets, and never in a million years did I think I'd be in the position that I am to be able to do, and blessed and fortunate to do the seva that I'm doing today. But it's committing to your craft, committing to your seva, whatever that is. And I think it's important is not trying to be a jack of all trades and master of none. Don't just necessarily mar your hatapad everywhere. Is figure out what your lane is and commit to it and build. We have a lot of people who don't have consistency or focus, and we bounce around, and you're never going to be able to actually build something meaningful, whether it's your own skill set or some kind of actual contribution or jathebandi or institution or something. So I think on an individual level, that's what I would focus on. On a, not going to macro level, but I think in terms of your local sangat, for me, I think the biggest thing, there's 3 steps that I think also honestly do work on the macro level as well. ਸਾਂਝੀ ਰਾਏ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਉਸਾਰਨੀ ਆ, ਲੋਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਸੰਗਤ ਨੂੰ ਮਜ਼ਬੂਤ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰਨਾ, ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਆਪਾਂ ਵੱਡੇ ਪੱਧਰ ਤੇ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਖੜੀਆਂ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ. So I think that first level, ਜਦੋਂ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਰਾਏ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, when we're talking about consensus building and coming to an understanding, there's 2 different pieces to it. And one, for me, the North Star, the most important thing that without this, there is no fada, which is one of the rare times I would say it, is understanding our Siddhant and what this Sangarsh is for. And for us, Gursikhi and Gurmat, Guru Khalsa Panth and Guru Granth Sahib Ji, our Pramukh, that is everything. It's not out of desire for political power, or we're not being treated fairly, or we want some kind of justice. This is a part of it's an expression of our seva and our simran. The goal of every Sikh is to merge with Akal Purkh. And this seva, the Sangarsh, is a responsibility on that path. So that fundamental understanding, I think, is crucial, is understanding that the Sangarsh is an expression of our Gursikhi, and that is the cornerstone and the foundation. This is not about nationalism. This is not about some kind of political grievance. This is about Halim Iraj, like Walpur Singh spoke about. The other thing when we talk about this consensus building, this Sanji Rai, is understanding the gravity of our halat right now. In a lot of these spaces, when we talk about the past, growing up, I think a lot of it was fighting to create space about what happened in the 80s and the 90s, and talking about the Sangarsh, the injustices and the resistance, and celebrating that movement. But I think we also, in this space, and now we have to understand the gravity of the situation that we're in right now, that this is not about small, local masale. Nothing is isolated anymore. Whatever we saw a few weeks ago when the mobs attacked Malton Gurdwara, I think is a perfect small example of how we organize and mobilize on our own terms. Naujawan got together and mobilized to protect our Asthan on our own terms. That was not a local Brampton issue. That was a global issue. That is about how the Indian state is trying to target and isolate us at every step of the way. When Balpur Singh talked about this idea of cognitive warfare, how does the Indian state impact how we react and how the world sees us right now? Given the fact that we are, like I said, we're a global stakeholder. This is not about Brampton issues. We're not a minority in Canada. We're Sikhs in Punjab, Sikhs in Canada, Sikhs in the UK, Sikhs in the US are different. The power and influence we have right now, the gravity of this moment right now is massive. And it's not just that we're getting space and people are listening to us now, is the geopolitical shifts that are underway. Is when we talk about this idea, we santali di galti nahi karni, that we're not going to repeat the mistakes of 47. We're on the cusp of a similar moment where there is transfers of power. There will be the redrawing of borders in our region right now. So the most important thing is for us to, at the very least, understand the gravity of our moment and the gravity of each and every one of our actions. So on a kata like this, a discussion like this, it seems insignificant, but it is massive in terms of setting those building blocks. And that for me is the next piece, is once we have this consensus building and this understanding, is how do we engage our local Sangat across Jathebandik lines and all of our disagreements and differences? How do we start to build communication and coordination on a local level? Rather than trying to jump to the end of the roadmap and the solution is automatically going to fall into our laps, we have to work and strive and struggle and fail every single day to get to that point. And the foundation point, the starting point, is at our local level, rather than trying to race off to the end. The Jathebandi, the communication and coordination at a structural, institutional level, I think is something that comes later, and it needs to come, and we need to accelerate that process. But I think for Naujawan in this space, I think that's the most important thing, is how do we develop the communication and coordination in our local Sangat, where we build those powerhouses and institutions of sovereignty in our local space that we're able to mobilize and respond to threats, but also proactively engage in the Sangharsh in a local way that's going to eventually build and channel into something larger.
So I'll do this fairly quickly. I'm going to echo some of what was said, but just emphasize the first thing. If you want to be active in Sikh spaces, want to do something for the Panth, then one of the foundational things I really, and not even if you want to be active for the Panth, that's a given. Connect with Sikhi. And I'm saying this, I don't do a lot of Sikhi prachar, as it were, anymore. But I can tell you this much, Sikhi is transformative. If you connect with Shabd, if you connect with Naam and Barni, you will notice a difference within yourself. So I'm not going to go too far into this, but I'll say this. If you aren't doing Japji Sahib, do Japji Sahib. If you haven't reflected on the meaning of Mool Mantar, then reflect on the meaning of Mool Mantar. Start small if you haven't started. And if you're already doing this, then increase it. Because that spiritual practice is going to give us strength. The fear that sometimes we feel, that ki ho juga if we do this, I really do feel that a lot of that dissipates when we're connected with Sikhi. Nirpao japai sagal pao mitae. Like if you are meditating on Nirpao, the one without fear, then those qualities start to come into you. The other thing that I'll say when you actually connect with Sikhi is that this is actually a spiritual path. This isn't just some secular movement. That Guru Sahib creates those opportunities for those people that are walking on that path. That help, you can feel it. That Guru Sahib actually actively takes a role in the work that you're doing, and you can feel it. Ek gallan karniyan saukhiyan hai, but honestly, I'll invite you to try it out. Just give it a shot. So that's on a personal level. But what I'm seeing today in the SSAs is really promising. So creating spaces to do regular Sangat. Like in my time, we never used to do Azaadi Waz, and I see a lot of SSAs are doing Azaadi Waz. Having a regular Rehra Sahib and a reflection on Shabd session, teaching Gurmukhi. This is really important work. I would encourage you to learn from each other. So that doesn't mean necessarily creating if you want to, you can, but that doesn't mean creating an umbrella SSA. It means just learning from each other and meeting at regular intervals. And we tried to do an SSA roundtable, and we'll probably try again. Just learning and adapting those things, whatever you think is working. And that creates that space for that Sangat. And Sangat is where all these ideas come from. And we have those organizations that are creating that space. Experience Sikh Initiative that, they have the stalls. They're doing a great job in creating those spaces. And what I'm also seeing is that this event is sponsored by the entire Gurdwaras Committee. We're seeing Gurdware who are noticing that there is a need to bring the younger generation on. So once again, like Jaskaran said, and Prabhu Singh have said, showing up is important and just having the patience. Because these are our institutions. We're going to have to get involved. And then finally, just don't be afraid. Get out there. And this is from a professional perspective and an advocacy perspective. Those people who are really successful in terms of their careers are the ones that aren't afraid of just getting out there and trying. What's the worst it won't work out? What if you fail? So what? You'll try again. People reaching out to employers, can we meet for coffee? Can we have a discussion, a phone call? That's the attitude we need for advocacy as well. So if you see something in your community That, like for example, what happened in Brampton and Malton. Write to your MP. If you see an article that has an error, there are organizations like Sikh Federation, now WSO, we work on these issues, but you can write to a journalist and you will get heard. They read those emails. So just get out there. And what's the worst that can happen? Like, I know some of us think, they'll put me on the blacklist. Like, compared to what our ancestors went through, like the worst they can do to you is say that, you might have trouble going to Punjab. I agree. I'm not minimizing it. It's significant. But compared to the shahidiyan that have happened, this isn't that big a deal. This is not something to be afraid of. And that only happens to the rarest of the rare. Showing up to events like this, like people that show up to referendum votes, they can't ban all of them. The more of us that talk, the less likely it is that they can do anything about it. And really there is strength in those numbers. So don't be afraid of engaging in this space. Don't be afraid about talking about Khalistan, because if we're afraid about talking about it, then what we've seen is India has defined it for many years now. Because we haven't done as a strong a job as we need, especially in the mainstream. So we need to take that space back. So don't be afraid.
I'm just going to touch on Sikhi Panthak Soch, Sikhi Panthak Rahat, and Sikhi Panthak Seva. Those are three things that right now I feel that at your age especially, many of you Naujawans that are here, or just anyone in general, including myself, things that we can all concentrate on. Just how many people here actually know who Bhai Anok Singh Babar was? So, significant amount. Bhai Anok Singh's Shahidi in the 1980s during the Khalistan Sangharsh is something that we often refer to as the Bhai Mani Singh of our generation. Somebody who was brutally tortured, body was ripped apart, eyes were removed. And through it all, he kept steadfast, Gurbani recitation, Naam Jap. I would just read you one small line of a small lekh that he once wrote, Par adeen sopane sukh nahi, which translates to that even in your dreams, without sovereignty, you can't find peace. So when we talk about like Panthak Soch and Sikhi Soch, it's absolutely necessary to speak and act and think in terms of sovereignty in everything we do. From our spirituality to the physical resistance of the Indian state, everything has to be in terms of sovereignty, because then the goal and the nishana is clear, like I spoke to earlier. Anything less than that and you're reduced to just being a citizen of a state that's relying on its judiciary system, which is often hand in hand with those perpetrators that are actually inflicting that violence. Case in point, that the Indian state. You have 4 commissions, 9 committees, 2 special investigative teams that sat for November '84, and you still have nothing. And why would we go back into that process again? So Soch and sovereignty, in sovereignty's terms, is absolutely essential for us. So I think building that Soch is important, and building that Soch is going to be absolutely necessary for you through your reading, where you're being represented, how you represent yourself, the words you choose. We're sitting here speaking about Khalistan. So I like to do things very practically. How do your conversations change right now? And if they change, you have to ask yourself why they change. If you can sit with the people to your left and right who you likely came here with, and you can have a very open conversation about Khalistan, only amongst the 3 or 4 of you though. But if you take that conversation and you remove yourself from just those 3 or 4 people, and those 3 or 4 people now have 3 or 4 more people that you don't know very well, can you have the same conversation? Take that conversation into your classroom at the university, and can you have the same language that you're using and speak in the terms of sovereignty that you might be able to speak in this room? And go one step further, can you do that in the media, and can you do that in the Canadian political spectrum? And if not, then we all have to ask ourselves, why not? And that's the Panthak Soch and Sikhi Soch I'm talking about, is to build that. And how do you build that? You will build it through the second part, which is Panthak and Sikhi Rahat and Jeevani. Establishing a Jeevani that allows you to do so. Like in the first context, when you think about Soch and ideas, you think about education a lot. A lot of you are students here. Education is basically what we're seeing today is this Western manifestation of what this education system is. Maharaj says, so padya, so pandit binna jinni kamana now. That the actual education is naam di kamai. That's the person that's actually wise. This is a hatyar or a sadhan for you. This is a weapon that you can use for the panth. Your education, whether you go into law, social sciences, human rights, any subject, if it's valuable to the panth in any which way, it is actually, then your padai is actually valuable. If it's not valuable to the panth, then you can earn money from it, you can do other things. But this idea that padai likhai, Santaji was elementary school student education. But why is there a level of respect with him? Because of so padya, so pandit bina, jinni kamana now. The naam kamai, the ability to make the right decisions in the right moment. And we talked about fear here. Maharaj tells us, nirpao pe gurcharni lage ek ram naam adara. That you have to dispel this fear. The only way you're going to dispel this fear is that if you come to Guru Sahib's charan, and you're only going to come truly to Guru Sahib's charan, is that if you actually believe that ek ram naam adara, that this world is false. Everything you establish here, nothing goes with you. And this is how fear is actually dispelled. When you start seeing your relationships, when you start seeing the people around you, when you start seeing your car, your home, your padai, your career, everything as temporary, nothing will go with you. Nothing is going to bring khushi to Guru Sahib when you leave here. And then the fear gets dispelled. And that's why I think it's very important to always build on that conversation, is the idea that how can you go into panthik spaces and do panthik seva with the right, correct panthik soch and language if we don't have a panthik jivan and panthik rath guiding us. We can go a percentage of the way, but we will falter. And that's where the panthik seva and sangat comes in as the final point, to build around you. So you have these groups that are here, you have smaller groups within these groups, is that this is a sangat that will actually help guide you. If you don't have the people around you to actually help you make decisions, then I would suggest very, very hardly that you go and find them. It's very difficult to do this as an individual. I wanted to kind of speak to just one other thing, you have so many spaces around you outside of the SSAs, outside of even gurdwaras that you can establish. I'm in a position where nobody told me to come, nobody asked, I didn't ask anyone. I kind of just started doing things, like everyone else here, just like you're doing right now. There's no reason we're sitting at this table and you're sitting over there. I actually don't know why I'm here anyways, but I'm here, so I get to talk now. But the idea is that you should be here, and how quickly can you get here? And what is it going to take for you to be here? The speaking and the soch to me is the biggest one. Language cannot be diluted or compromised anymore. We never go back to the K word. We never take the Shabdavali that Guru Sahib has given us or our Panth has come up with, and we reduce it because the Gora doesn't understand it, doesn't want to understand it. And those are the reasons why we're actually reducing and compromising our own language. It's unforgivable in our history. This is the way generations are corrupted. And we are responsible to those generations. I'll give you one small little idea of Sakhi, and then you've heard Pai Taru Singh's Shahidi Sakhi probably several times. You've all seen him in pictures at the Gurdwara Sahib with his scalp ripped off his head. When he was arrested, I use this often because I find it to be very powerful for people and myself as well, is that when Pai Taru Singh was arrested, the Panth did ardas, and the ardas wasn't for him to save his life or him to be spared. It was Sikhi Saath Nibahi Saas. The ardas was Sikhi Kesa Swasa Sang Nib Javed, that he doesn't actually back down, he doesn't compromise, he doesn't dilute, he actually stays the course now, even if that means his life. And once he did give Shahidi, the Panth did ardas again, Satgur Paj Khalse Rakhi Rahe Jagat Mein Jug Jug Sakhi. That his death, Satgur ne Sati Paj Rakh, that he honored the Khalsa by ensuring that Pai Taru Singh went through with the Shahidi in the way, in Chardi Kala that he did. So this is a different nazariya, different way of thinking, different way of viewing the world. This is us. And that's what I think we've been trying to get across in these last 2 hours, is that you have a very different way of viewing the world. And the world might view you very differently. But like Santaji said, that if a terrorist is defined for the Indian state as somebody who does Amrit Sanchars, Sakhaz Gurbani, gets people to join underneath an Nishan Sahib, if that's a terrorist in their eyes, then I'm a terrorist. You have to stop letting others define who you are and find out who you actually are by connecting, like Balpreet saying, with Guru Sahib directly yourself, building that relationship, dispelling that fear, and then that Panthak Seva, whatever it is, reading, writing, you can write articles, there's so many things that people have mentioned here. I would just end with Guru Gobind Singh's bol, like, Kahyo Prabhu so pak ho, kisu na kaan rakho. That a Sikh is someone that only adheres to what Akal Purakh and the Satguru has said to them, and bows before no worldly power, government, military. That's who a Sikh is. And how do we get there? That's dispelling fear. That's being nirpao. But it doesn't happen overnight. It has to take a committed Sikh with trust in Guru Sahib to get there. And I think that's the first step in this Panthak Seva for myself and for all of you as well.
Tigaji, thank you so much. Now we're going to start moving into some of the Q&A, some of the questions that we had from the audience. We'll start out with the QR code. In the interest of time, let's just try to be a little bit mindful about the length of the answers for this portion. This will be less of an open panel discussion style. We'll have some questions directed towards specific speakers on the panel. And this was going to be a separate question, but I think we can just kind of include it generally in the answers, where I think a lot of the times in these panels, we have our kind of circle of competence where we can only ask questions within what we know. And then a lot of the times when we talk to educated panelists like the ones that we have today, even when they do talks or when they try to explain things to Sangat, oftentimes they'll try to take a really big idea and try to condense it in a way that will be appealing to everybody. And I think let's try for these answers. I think it would be really interesting both for the audience and for the panelists if there's any question where you feel like there's something there that's not being touched on that you think needs to be touched on, or even generally when we talk about panels like this, when we go into these types of discussions, when there are topics that you feel like never really get touched on, questions that you feel like never really get answered, that you really want to speak about, if you want to incorporate that in your answers, that would be great too. So we'll start with the first one directed towards by Prabjot Singh. This question says, I think we are lacking Panthik documents and official academia. For example, a quick search like why do Sikhs want Khalistan will lead you with no results. So how do we get into solving issues like these?
So yeah, I think absolutely. I think all of us here would agree that there are those gaps, and I think a lot of us, so even when we're in our undergrad and we're writing like a term paper or research paper or anything, we want to write it on Khalistan or the Sangharsh, we struggle to come up with academic sources that we can cite or we can rely on. So when we started doing Seva with the Khalistan Center, that was kind of one of the reasons that we set up that institution in terms of how do we establish and set thought leadership within our own Naujawan that's directed towards our own Naujawan to develop those resources that give us the opportunity to think through our problems and our solutions on our own terms. So I think the answer is is pretty much implied within the question, is that yeah, there is absolutely a gap, and there's this type of work and these resources are missing, and we need to work on filling those gaps. And so if somebody's interested in academia, then you can go down that path and we can chat with myself, Tirkor, about what that path of getting into academia looks like. But there are possibilities to also publish early on, even during your undergrad or in a master's or other case. But what I would really try to emphasize, that as important as that space is, as an external space in another battlefield where we need to be present, where we need to respond, develop our own resources, I would say it's much more important for us to develop our own institutions, our own platforms, where we're developing these resources and engaging in this kind of theoretical and intellectual analysis on our own platforms. So whether that's through Khalistan Center, whether that's through Baz News, Panth Punjab Project, and other platforms, we can write for ourselves as well, and that's just as valid and legitimate and as important. So if anybody's interested in that space, writing, analyzing, research, I think, like I said earlier, is to show up and start doing that seva and connecting with others in that space as well.
Thank you. This next question I think kind of got answered a little bit by Jiskadan. But if you want to, I think we'll expand a little bit more on one piece. The question said, you said these types of talks are very similar to the ones that you've been attending, and you said that most of us here are pretty well informed on the state of Sikh, on the Sikh community. So I ask, what is the next step? Is activism simply discussing events in an academic setting, or is there on-the-ground work we should be engaged in? I know you mentioned showing up is really important, getting involved in these sorts of things, but I think let's touch more on the activism piece in terms of, is activism simply just discussing events, or is there more to that activism?
I think talking about what's happening is obviously incredibly important. Finding excuses and reasons to congregate together in spaces like this one, so we can deepen the bonds with one another, is incredibly important. But there also needs to be real world manifestations of that activism. And it's understanding and thinking about, first of all, what are some issues in our community that need addressing? And then what are some tools or initiatives that we can do to solve those problems? I'll just give you another example. When I joined WSO, after a little while, we realized that there is a big demand amongst our youth to equip them with kind of the skills to succeed in Canada. And two initiatives that were born out of that, fact-finding that happened, going coast to coast, speaking with different Gurdwaras, speaking with different organizations, speaking with different bodies, was a Sikh mentorship program where we started linking up professionals with students who aspire to join those professions. And we since then have typically linked about over 100 mentors with over 100 mentees, and hold a lot of different mentorship programs to support these youth. Many of them have gone on to actually establish careers as a result of that, which is amazing. The other example was, we tend to believe that leaders are just born, that this is something that, just leadership is born, it's innate, it's something that just happens, which is absolutely false. That's ridiculous. And there was a big appetite when we spoke with people across the country for an initiative that helped develop leadership skills in youth, which is why then we launched over 10 years ago the Sikh Youth Leadership Institute. Again, that's where we fly down 20 odd youth from across Canada to Ottawa. And we keep them there for 3-4 days, all expenses paid, and we provide them very intensive leadership module training. But then also they join an alumni network who then lean on one another to launch a whole host of incredible stuff, initiatives or different things. And they've gone on to do absolutely amazing stuff. But that was an initiative. That's a form of advocacy, of activism that addressed needs in the community, that came about because, to earlier points, we went in the community, we listened. And most of these conversations started with, what's WSO doing? You guys aren't doing anything. You're not doing anything practical for our kids. Do something. And the easy response reaction could have been, well, here's all the 100 things we're doing. You just don't pay attention. You just don't know what we're doing. Blah, blah, blah. Instead, it was receptive. It was, what is some things that you think we should be tackling? And then turning that into real world initiatives that act as models for Sikhs around the world to mimic and implement, and happily so. So that's an example of how advocacy and activism can continue to happen. There's so many gaps. There's so many things that we need to address in our community. And you guys sitting here will be the ones to do it. It's probably not going to be us folks sitting up here. Our window has closed for the most part. You guys have the initiative. You're active. You got great ideas. You know what's happening to you guys at the age you're at. What's the real kind of world realities of what you're dealing with. And then work with institutions that already exist. I think we get in the habit of thinking like we're kind of alone. We kind of got to think of doing this on our own. There's so many assets in the community that can help you launch what it is that you're thinking. Don't hesitate to reach out to the folks sitting up here. Again, you'll be surprised at how quickly you can make an idea into reality.
Awesome. Quickly, apologies. I know that we had a lot of questions that came in for the QR code. We only have about 3 more to go through. So if your question doesn't get asked, please feel free to talk to some of the panelists after, and then you can kind of speak to them about it throughout the rest of the event. This next question is for Maninder Singh. The question, again, I think is something that you touched on a little bit, but I think the second part of the question we should kind of focus on. So the question is, how do we balance the efforts to establish a free country on a global scale from Western countries with fighting the current day-to-day struggles that we see in Punjab, for example, drugs, cultural assimilation, and discrimination? And the second part is, what are your thoughts on the current allocation of resources to fighting this global scale battle for freedom and fighting the current issues in Punjab? So I think it's more about kind of the different avenues and how that resource is allocated across those different avenues.
I can try. I don't have many answers, but I can definitely give you my opinion. Balancing Punjab and the diaspora has always been very kind of like an interesting kind of like space for Sikhs. Everything that's happening in Punjab is the direct result of gulami, not discrimination. What we had was at the Haskar, a Sikh historian actually tried to define this as in like you need to stop speaking about what's happening in Punjab in terms of just discrimination. And Santji gave us a word gulami because the only thing that comes out of gulami is Azaadi, is freedom. Discrimination is within the daira of the state. You're asking for wada adhikar or more rights or not to be discriminated against and to be an equal player. But it doesn't grant you Azaadi or freedom. So everything we see in Punjab, from like the drug epidemic to environmental catastrophe to language issues to Guru Granth Sahib Ji Beadbiyan, over and over again, these issues take precedent, and the larger kind of fight of struggle for Azaadi actually gets lost within it. So I think balancing the two, the diaspora has to come up with, and we have to some degree, is how do we actually take care of a lot of those issues for Punjab? We can be active voices in the West, in like I say the West, but from like Australia to Europe to here. We have the means to actually raise awareness amongst ourselves at least, and now in this day and age on social media. Beyond that, we can fund a lot of things that happen in Punjab, and I'll just say that very openly when it comes to social service type issues, to garibi and poverty. But one of the biggest things is migration. The issues around migration are front and center as to why are people leaving. So the investment in Punjab is bare minimum from when it comes to the central government. Jobs, you have to leave if you're a technical person, maybe down to Bangalore or Goa or other areas in the south. So Punjabi youth is very limited in what they can do within Punjab as well, so they leave. So we have like multiple, let's say, disastrous situations that are facing us right now. And if we start dealing with every single one of them and leave the greater fight for Azaadi, for Khalistan off to the side, I think it would be a grave mistake on our part. So you do have to deal with the issues as they come up, but all of our resources can't be dealt over there. That we're dealing with basically, if I can just term it this way and move on, is that you have a disease that is Hindutva, Brahmanical regimes and this Indian state. The symptoms of that disease is everything we've listed off. The environmental genocide, the cultural linguistic genocide, the Beadbiyan, all those are symptoms of that greater disease. How long can we afford to deal with a terminal illness like the Indian state that is hell-bent on either annihilating us or assimilating us? How long can we deal with the symptoms for? Eventually, the disease will destroy us. So in order to deal with that disease, the sovereignty movement for Khalistan has to be just as strong, if not stronger. As long as we're putting resources towards that, we can deal with the symptoms as well. But those are the things that I think some of the other speakers may have touched on already, is that like when we jatheband ourselves, like when we ask these questions around, hey, is activism just speaking about things, gathering once or twice every like 6 months and having a program like this? Absolutely not. There's about 7 things that I listed off. There's probably about 17 things that I've missed. All of those require tan, man, and tan, as we say for seva, your bodies, your mind, and your resources. All of them need that. What can you give? That's the question. That's how you balance, in my opinion, both of those things. It's a hard and struggle fight. There's no right or wrong answer to it necessarily, but you have to do something. You can't just leave Punjab to its own, the way the Indian state is dealing with it as like a colony, and you can't put all your resources into dealing with the symptoms or the disease will overwhelm you. So we're in that situation where we have to find our own pathways. If you're interested in human rights, like I just give these examples off the top of my head, but if you're interested in human rights, Insaf basically picked up where Baijaswant Singh Khalilad left off. For over 20 years, just Karan Kaur and Sukhman Singh have been running Insaf.
They go to Punjab, they collected all the data, they went home to home. They didn't capture everything, but they captured a ton of defining information for our generation that we can use as data. There are ways that you can get involved. That's how you balance it. You balance by splitting up and not putting all your eggs in one basket, that you split up into different streams of the revolution, of the Sangharsh, and you represent all of them. I think the second part of that question, did I hit it, or do you want me to keep going?
Allocation.
That's good.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah. We'll go for two more. We're supposed to have one more, but one of our Seva Lads had a burning question that he really wanted to ask to Prabdul Singh, so we'll do that one right after this one. Just this one's directed towards Balpreet Singh. The question is, Guru Gobind Singh Ji gave us Panj Pradhani. Can you shed light on this Panj Pradhani system, and do you think it's a better system than what we currently have, and how can we kind of re-establish that system?
So I would suggest that the Panch Pradhani system is actually before even Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Bhai Gurdas Ji has written about it. A Panji Parmeshwar, that Vaheguru Kalpurkh is within 5 Gursikhs who are together. So I think moving forward, I'm not going to draw this answer out, but I think moving forward, we have to look at that system, and then we can look at how Baba Banda Singh operated with that system, right? It was Baba Banda Singh who was a Jathedar, who then had Panch Pyare who were almost like a veto around it. So I think that's an authentically Sikh system. So we need to shift. Like when WSO was formed in 1984, our constitution was election-based. We reformed our constitution in our last General Assembly, or our last convention, and we are now consensus-based. So we need to come back to those authentically Sikh models, and I think that's something that all of us can strive towards. I'm going to just add one thing. In terms of getting involved, first of all, we may belong to different Jathebandiya, we may operate in a different way, but I think this has been said before, we need to have that respect amongst each other, that we may, behave in different ways, and we may take up space in places that, we find ways to act in spaces that aren't necessarily inherently Sikh. But having that trust amongst each other is very important. And then getting involved with Jathebandiya is a good thing. So for us, Jaskaran has named a couple of things. One thing that's coming up is, once again, defining our own terms. So anti-Sikh hate. Just like anti-Semitism has a definition, Islamophobia has a definition. We have a project with the Canadian Race Relations Foundation to create our own definition of anti-Sikh hate. And we will be in January having town halls across Canada where we'll be reaching out to the community to hear about anti-Sikh hate, and then to arrive at a definition and examples of it, and then have that consolidated into a report that we can use moving forward. Because right now, a lot of these incidents are lost under the term of South Asian. South Asian is just a messed up term. Like, we don't have a Punjabi word for South Asian, and it erases our identity. So Stats Canada collects data around South Asian, and we've told them that doesn't make any sense. But this will be an important step forward to actually getting data that's relevant to us.
Question that we had. I'll try to combine this with another question that somebody else had asked. But this question is directed towards Prabdul Singh. You said the best solution is to make political powerhouses. What would those look like, and what would their capabilities be? And then how do we actually get to creating those political powerhouses? And then I'll add on to that with another question that was asked, which is kind of thinking within those political powerhouses, what is the importance of our economic well-being and success, and how can we build economic success for the Panth and improve the current economic state of where we are?
Repeat the question one more time.
Yeah. So there was how do we create political powerhouses? What do they look like? What would their capabilities be? And then how does economic well-being and success fit into that?
So I'm going to try my best to remember all the questions and try to do all of them justice. So I think the most important one for me, and I think everything else will flow from this, is how do we understand political power and how do we understand our own institutions? I think a very simple example that I want to start with is the 2018 report that we kind of talked about. So the Canadian government, after pressure from India, obviously, in December 2018, publishes their public safety report and says that Sikh Khalistani extremism is a threat to Canada. And obviously there's a lot of back and forth, lobbying and advocacy efforts to try and explain why this is a problem and it shouldn't happen. When it fundamentally shifted is when Gurdwara in this country said very clearly and emphatically that if this does not get fixed and addressed, that no politician from the government will be able to enter our spaces and speak from our stage. And within, I think it was 36 hours, that report was taken back, revised, and reissued without that reference calling us extremists. So I think that's the kind of example that I'm giving, is I think especially in Canada, and I think this Bamari is starting to extend to other countries as well in the diaspora, where we think political power comes purely from the state, and that our way to solve our panthik masale is through par adin sansthawa, through subordinated institutions of the state that are not our own. So for a long time, our political activity as a collective was in fundraising for political parties, trying to get our individuals, people from our community nominated, elected, and we'd send them into the House of Commons. And I think 2018, when Trudeau goes to India, I think was a rude awakening for a lot of people, and where I think you started to see a bit of a shift in this approach to politics, at least in Canada, is we had, I don't even remember how many MPs at that time. 2015, I think, was record-breaking and the most in the diaspora at that time. 18? And you had a bunch of ministers and stuff at that same time as well. Soon as the government came back, during that trip, they signed an information and intelligence sharing agreement with India that has led to direct harms on Naujawan in Canada and in Punjab. You had the Canadian government taking a number of actions against Sikh activists in this country. You saw the public safety report coming out that year as well. And I think it was a very clear moment where we had to kind of realize and look in the mirror and understand that our political strategy and our understanding that, hey, we're going to work through their system to solve our problems wasn't going to work, because an MP that gets elected to the Canadian House of Commons is a Canadian representative, not a Sikh representative. So when we talk about building political power, we're talking about our own institutions that exist and operate on our own terms. Our Gurdwara are not just Sikh temples, they're not just places of worship, it's a sovereign space. That's a sovereign space. And we have to start acting and behaving in that way, where it's not that we're going to go to a different state and ask them to solve all of our problems. We're going to engage, and all of us on this table engage with the state and external stakeholders and entities in a lot of different ways. But never is it in a sense that they're going to solve our problems. It's one battlefield, it's one piece of the puzzle, but that is not the be-all, end-all. That is not the space of the Sangharsh. That's one piece of the puzzle and one responsibility that we have here. Fundamentally, when we build the power in our own institutions, is within our own Sangat, through our own Gurdwara and Jathebandi, outside of state structures. And that works within Punjab and within the diaspora. The question earlier that was asked by Maninder Singh about this idea of, do we focus on Raj or do we focus on the issues and the symptoms? And the answer is very, very clear, that we have to focus on our sovereignty. But when we look at these two different areas and we separate them, because it's almost as though we think that Raj is going to come from something or somewhere else, and that intention needs to be built or derived from somewhere, and dealing with our social problems is going to be from somewhere else. That idea that I talked about earlier, this idea of re-understanding ourselves as Khod Khoda. Our political model of justice and of Raj has never ever relied on somebody else giving us power. It has always been built upon Sangharsh, upon the Deg and the Teg, our ability to build our own social institutions, our own economic well-being and institutions that are going to dispense justice and social well-being, and that leads to our victory and that leads to our iraj. Nobody else is going to give us that right or that authorization. We need to build it on our own terms through our own institutions. So whether that's a local Panthik Jathebandi, whether that's a Gurdwara, that is the base where we start building from. When you look at in Punjab, you see absolute political chaos right now. And everybody is trying to figure out what do we do next, and everybody is fixated on how do we revive the Akali Dal, how do we take over SGPC. In both of those examples, you're talking about institutions that are subordinated to the state, that the Indian state controls. They control all the levers, all of the entry points, all of the outcomes. If your entire existence and your political strategy to build a sovereign Raj is pretty much contingent on your oppressor's political institutions, you're in for a rude awakening and a significant problem. How do we start building power through our Sangat, Panthik Jathebandiyan, Gurdware, and Sarbat Khalsa outside of state systems that has soft and hard power, that is able to then engage in conflict and sangharsh to dispense justice for everybody, not us asking for justice for other people. And I think in terms of the economic well-being, the way that the Panth has always done it again, I think the example is khod khoda hoke, that the Khalsa will take the resources that it needs to engage in its sangharsh. 18ਵੀਂ ਸਦੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, the Khalsa used to do hamle on Abdali's caravan and take that economic wealth, use it to pretty much fuel its own sangharsh and to fund it within ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋੜਵੰਦ ਹੈਗੇ ਗਰੀਬ ਦੀ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਰਵਾਣੀ ਦੀ ਪੱਖਿਆ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਜਾਰੂ ਲਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵੇਲੇ ਵੀ you saw bank ਡਾਕੇ ਭਾਈ ਹਰਜਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਜਿੰਦਾ ਸੁਖਦੇਵ ਸਿੰਘ ਸੁੱਖਾ were iconic in their use of this strategy to pretty much lot the Sarkari Khajana and their resources and use it for our purpose. So again, I'm not looking to the government to solve any of our social, economic, or political problems. How do we engage and look internally and engage within our Sangat and the Panth to exist as Khoda Khoda the way that the Guru has actually intended for us?